They called him the Kid. He wasn't a grizzled gunslinger, nor a hardened old outlaw. He was just a boy, but he became the most feared young killer in the Wild West. Some say he gunned down 21 men before he reached 21 years old. Others say fewer. The truth is blurred, but one thing is certain. Billy the Kid carved his name into American legend with blood and bullets. To the law, he was a murderer. To ranch hands and poor settlers, he was a hero, a boy who stood against corrupt sheriffs and greedy cattle barons. He rode fast, laughed easily, and killed without hesitation. And when the end came, it wasn't on a battlefield or in a saloon shootout. It came quietly, in the dead of night, when his own friend turned sheriff pulled the trigger. How does a skinny, fatherless boy from New York become the most famous outlaw in the Wild West? How does a teenager with nothing but a quick smile and quicker draw rise to defy the law of the frontier? Tonight, we trace the rise and fall of Billy the Kid, the boy who became a legend, the outlaw who became immortal. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to Outlaws of the Wild West, where legends never die. Every week, we bring you the untold stories of America's most notorious outlaws. Hit that button now, so you don't miss the tales that shape the frontier. And now, let's ride back to 1859, where a child named Henry McCarty took his first breath. A child the world would remember as Billy the Kid. Henry McCarty was born in 1859 in the slums of New York City. His father vanished early. Some said he died. Others whispered he simply abandoned the family. His mother, Catherine, carried the weight of raising two sons alone. Life in New York was harsh. Narrow alleys, crowded tenements, and hunger that gnawed at the bones. When Catherine fell ill, she made a desperate choice. She packed her boys and headed west, chasing whispers of a better life. They moved from Indiana to Kansas, then farther still, until finally settling in New Mexico. The frontier was raw, unforgiving, but full of promise. For a boy like Henry, it was a chance to start over. Henry was small, wiry, quick with a grin. He wasn't the type to intimidate. Teachers said he was bright, even charming. But poverty shadowed him. His mother struggled with tuberculosis, coughing blood into rags at night. Henry scavenged, stole bread, did what he could to help. In 1874, Catherine died. Henry was just 14. Orphaned, homeless, and desperate, he fell into the streets of Silver City. The town was no place for a boy. Saloons roared with drunken laughter. Miners staggered through dust-choked streets. Gamblers and drifters prowled like wolves. Henry survived by doing odd jobs, washing dishes, sleeping in stables. But temptation clawed at him. Hunger turned to theft. Theft turned to crime. One story says Henry's first arrest came when he stole laundry, just a bundle of clothes. The sheriff, surprised at the boy's politeness, thought jail might scare him straight, but Henry slipped through the chimney and vanished into the night. It was his first escape, not his last. Drifting from town to town, Henry grew bolder. He gambled, rustled cattle, stole horses. Somewhere along the way, he picked up the name Kid. Some said it was his boyish face. Others said it was the way he laughed like a child even after a killing. Either way, the name stuck. Then came the moment that changed everything. The first kill. It was 1,877 inches, Arizona. Henry was 17. He had taken work at a ranch, But an argument exploded with a blacksmith named Frank Windy Cahill. Cahill was older, larger, a bully who towered over the skinny boy. Witnesses said he mocked Henry, shoved him, threw him to the ground. But Henry wasn't the timid boy anymore. He rose, dust on his shirt, eyes blazing. His hand flashed to his revolver. A shot cracked. Cahill staggered, blood blooming across his chest. He fell, choking in the dirt. Henry fled on horseback, heart pounding, fear and thrill mixing in his veins. He had killed a man. The boy had crossed a line. From that day forward, he was no longer Henry McCarty. He was Billy the Kid. The frontier had claimed him, and Billy the Kid would never turn back. With each robbery, each gunfight, his legend grew. And soon, the Lincoln County War would give him the stage that transformed a runaway orphan into the most infamous outlaw in America. Billy fled Arizona, drifting back into New Mexico. He lived on the run, stealing horses, rustling cattle, surviving on charm and a quick draw. Wherever he went, stories followed. Some called him reckless. Others said he was invincible, but all agreed he was fast, deadly fast. The Kid's charm was as dangerous as his revolver. He smiled easily, joked with strangers, danced at fiestas, and courted women with boyish boldness. To many, he seemed harmless until the pistol appeared. That contrast, the boyish grin, and the sudden gunfire, made him unforgettable. By 1877, Billy had drifted into the brewing storm that would define him. The Lincoln County War. Lincoln County, New Mexico, was ruled by a monopoly, a ruthless partnership between Lawrence Murphy and James Dolan. They controlled the only store, the only bank, and held the law in their pocket. Ranchers and farmers groaned under their grip. Then came John Tunstall, an Englishman who dared to challenge their empire. He opened his own store, fairer prices, honest credit. Murphy and Dolan saw a threat. Billy found work under Tunstall, tending horses, running errands. For the first time, he had a mentor, a man who treated him with respect. Tunstall saw in Billy more than an outlaw. He saw potential, even decency. Billy, in turn, admired the Englishman. Perhaps, in another life, he might have been saved. But the West was no place for salvation. In February 1878, Tunstall was ambushed, shot from his horse by Dolan's men. His body was left in the dust. Billy knelt over his fallen employer, eyes burning with fury. "I'll see them all in hell," he swore. One of their first strikes was the killing of Sheriff William Brady, a known ally of Dolan. On a clear April morning, Billy and the regulators waited in ambush. Brady walked the street, unaware. Shots thundered. Bullets tore into his chest. He fell dead in the dust. Law and badge shattered. The killing sent shockwaves. Billy was no longer just a runaway boy. He was a declared outlaw, hunted by the law, his name etched into wanted posters. But the regulators pressed on. Gunfights erupted across Lincoln County. Smoke curled over ranch houses. Families fled. Blood stained the dry New Mexico soil. Billy's pistol spoke often, his legend growing with each echo. Witnesses remembered his laughter in the midst of gunfire, the way he taunted enemies, the sparkle in his eyes even as men fell. To his allies, he was fearless. To his enemies, he was a demon in human form. By summer, the Lincoln County War reached its climax. The regulators barricaded themselves in a house in Lincoln. Dolan's men surrounded them. For 5 days, gunfire rattled. Bullets punched through adobe walls. Flames roared as the house was set alight. Smoke choked the outlaws inside. Billy burst from the flames, revolvers blazing, carving a path through enemy fire. Somehow, he escaped, vanishing into the night while others fell. It was the kind of escape that fed legends. Newspapers devoured the story, painting Billy as both hero and villain. By the end of the war, bodies littered the county, but justice was nowhere to be found. The power shifted, alliances shifted, but Billy remained an outlaw. His promise to avenge Tunstall had been fulfilled in blood, and now there was no turning back. The Lincoln County War had made Billy the Kid a legend, but legends cannot live in peace. As the law closed in, Billy became more desperate, more daring, and his escapes would astonish the world. The Lincoln County War had burned itself out, but from its ashes a legend rose. Billy the Kid, once a drifting orphan, was now the most notorious young outlaw in the West. His name filled newspapers. His face appeared on wanted posters across New Mexico. To some, he was a freedom fighter. To others, a blood-soaked killer. But to all, he was unforgettable. The law was relentless. Pauses chased him across deserts and canyons. But Billy was slippery. He vanished into mountains, appeared at fiestas, danced with senoritas, then disappeared before the sheriffs arrived. He laughed at danger, taunted pursuers, lived as if death were a game. One story tells of Billy captured in Mesilla. Shackled, marched through town. He grinned at bystanders. "Don't worry," he said with a wink. "I'll be free before long." And he was right. He slipped his chains, fled into the night, and by dawn was gone. Each escape added to his myth. Newspapers exaggerated, some claiming he had killed a man for every year of his life. 21 notches on his gun, they said. Whether true or not, the number stuck. The kid became a ghost story told to children and a hero sung about in taverns. But notoriety brought hunters. The governor of New Mexico, Lew Wallace, grew desperate. He offered amnesty to outlaws who surrendered, hoping to bring peace. Billy even wrote him a letter, promising to testify in exchange for a pardon. Wallace agreed, but the promise was broken. Billy gave his testimony, but the pardon never came. The betrayal hardened him. By 1880, Billy was back in chains. Sheriff Pat Garrett, once a drinking companion, now his hunter, had tracked him down. In December, Billy was captured near Stinking Springs. Newspapers declared it the end. The outlaw had finally been caught. In April 1881, Billy was tried in Mesilla for the murder of Sheriff Brady. The courtroom buzzed with spectators, eager to see the boy killer. Billy listened calmly as the jury pronounced him guilty. The sentence was death hanging by the neck until dead. The date was set, May 13th. The location, Lincoln, the very town where he had made his name. Guards watched him day and night. He was shackled, caged, surrounded. Escape was impossible. But Billy the Kid was not a man to accept fate. But the 28th of April, 1881, the courthouse in Lincoln buzzed with routine. Billy, shackled, was escorted upstairs to use the privy. 2 guards stood nearby, Deputy James Bell and Deputy Bob Olinger. As Bell led him back down the stairs, Billy stumbled. Bell moved closer. In an instant, Billy whirled, seized Bell's pistol, and fired. The shot echoed through the courthouse. Bell staggered into the street, gasping, "He's killed me," before collapsing dead. Billy ran upstairs, grabbed a shotgun loaded with buckshot. Ollinger, hearing the noise, sprinted across the street. Billy leaned from the window, called out, "Hello, Bob." The blast tore through Ollinger, throwing him lifeless to the dirt. In minutes, 2 deputies were dead, the shackles gone, and Billy was free. He mounted a stolen horse, laughing, and vanished into the New Mexico night. The escape electrified the nation. Newspapers declared it miraculous, impossible, the work of the devil himself. Songs were written, dime novels sold. The boy outlaw had defied death again. For Billy, it was his greatest triumph and his last. Billy the Kid had cheated the hangman, killed his guards, and ridden free into the dark. But the law had not given up. Sheriff Pat Garrett was still hunting. And in the shadows, betrayal waited. The boy outlaw's story was racing toward its final gunshot. Billy the Kid had done the impossible. He had killed 2 guards, broken free from chains, and vanished into the night on a stolen horse. Across the nation, people gasped in disbelief. The outlaw boy had cheated death once again, but freedom was short. Sheriff Pat Garrett, once Billy's drinking partner, now his hunter, was determined. The territory would never be safe until the kid was in the ground. Garrett knew Billy's habits, his hiding places, his friends, and he knew the outlaw was running out of allies. Billy hid near Fort Sumner, New Mexico, a place he loved. He lingered at fiestas, danced with Mexican girls, played guitar under the stars. Despite the danger, he could not resist the laughter, the warmth, the sense of belonging. For a brief time, it seemed he might live forever, drifting, escaping, smiling that boyish grin while sheriffs scoured the land. But betrayal rode close. In July 1881, Garrett learned Billy was hiding at the home of a friend, Pete Maxwell, in Fort Sumner. The house sat near the Pecos River, its adobe walls quiet in the summer heat. Garrett gathered deputies and waited in the shadows, hearts pounding, revolvers ready. That night, Billy wandered into Maxwell's house. The air was still, the moonlight faint. Billy carried a knife and a revolver, his spurs jingling softly on the floorboards. He pushed open Maxwell's door. Inside, Pat Garrett was waiting in the dark. "¿Quién es?" Billy whispered in Spanish. "Who's there?" Garrett's pistol answered. A flash, a thunderclap in the night. The bullet tore into Billy's chest. He gasped, staggered, and fell. At just 21 years old, the boy outlaw was dead. Silence followed. Then whispers spread like wildfire. Billy the Kid was gone. Pat Garrett, the man who killed him, found no peace. Some hailed him as a hero, but many despised him as the friend who betrayed the kid. Garrett would spend the rest of his life haunted by that shot in the dark, his name tied forever to Billy's. But history records his death on the 14th of July, 1881. The boy who had killed, laughed, escaped, and defied the law was finally brought down not in a blaze of glory, but in the stillness of betrayal. Garrett dragged Billy's body into the street. Locals crowded around, staring in silence. Some wept. Some crossed themselves. Others whispered, "He was just a boy." The newspapers roared. Some praised Garrett as a hero. Others mourned the kid, calling him a victim of corrupt politics, a rebel who stood for the common man. Songs and dime novels rushed to print, turning him into a folk hero. Billy's grave in Fort Sumner became a pilgrimage site. Flowers, candles, whispers of his name lingered long after the dust settled. To his enemies, he was a killer finally silenced. To the common folk, he was a symbol of resistance, a boy who laughed at the law, defied corrupt sheriffs, and lived free when others bowed. Songs called him a hero. Dime novels painted him as a Robin Hood. Around campfires, his name was whispered with awe. But behind the myth was a tragedy. Billy was not a grizzled outlaw hardened by decades of crime. He was a boy, barely a man, who grew up in hunger, violence, and betrayal. He had a quick smile, a quick temper, and a quicker gun, and that combination made him unforgettable. Billy's grave became a shrine. Tourists still visit Fort Sumner to see the resting place of the boy outlaw. His story inspired books, movies, songs, each retelling, reshaping him, blurring the line between truth and legend. Some even claimed Billy lived on, that Garrett killed the wrong man. The legend refused to die. And maybe that is the point. Billy the Kid reminds us that legends are not about facts. They are about what people choose to remember, about the myths we need to tell ourselves of freedom, rebellion, and the price of living too fast, too young. Billy the Kid's death should have ended the story. A single gunshot in a quiet room, July 1881. But with Billy, the end was only the beginning. Because legends do not die with the body. They grow, they twist, they take root in the imagination. Soon after his death, whispers spread. Was Pat Garrett truly the man who killed the kid? Some claimed he shot the wrong outlaw in that darkened room. Others swore Billy had slipped away into Mexico, living under a new name, smiling that boyish grin while the law hunted a ghost. Over the decades, imposters surfaced. One of the most famous was Brushy Bill Roberts, a rancher in Texas who swore in 1950 that he was Billy the Kid, grown old. His story stirred headlines and split historians. Could the kid have survived into the 20th century? The governor of New Mexico even held a hearing. But Brushy Bill died before the truth could be proven. To this day, some believe. Others dismiss him as a hoax. As the frontier faded, Hollywood took over. Billy appeared in silent films and later in Western epics, each version reshaping him. In some, he was a ruthless killer. In others, a misunderstood boy, forced into violence by a cruel world. Actors from Paul Newman to Emilio Estevez wore his face, each retelling making the myth stronger. And yet, through all the stories, one truth remained. Billy was only 21 when he died, not a grizzled outlaw with gray in his beard, a boy. Perhaps that is why the world could not let him go. For in Billy the Kid, people saw the frontier itself, wild, untamed, full of promise, and doomed to vanish. His legend became a mirror of America's hunger for freedom and its fear of what freedom costs. Even today, tourists flock to Fort Sumner, standing by his grave, laying flowers in the dust. They take photos, whisper his name, and argue over the mystery. Did he really die here? Or does he ride still, somewhere out there in the desert twilight? Billy the Kid lives on, in songs, in films, in stories, and in the imagination of every soul who has ever dreamed of breaking chains, laughing at the law, and living free. For Billy was not just a boy outlaw. He was, and will always be, a legend. Billy the Kid's story ends in the summer of 1881. But his legend has never ended. He remains frozen in time, a boy with a revolver, a grin, and a destiny written in blood. To his enemies, he was a killer finally silenced. To the poor, he was a rebel who stood against corrupt powers. To history, he is a riddle that can never be solved. What we know for certain is this: Billy the Kid became larger than life, not because he lived long, but because he lived fast, reckless, and unforgettable. His story reminds us that the Wild West was not just a place on a map. It was a crucible, forging myths that still haunt America today. And now his tale belongs to you, the listener. Each time it is told, Billy rides again. Each time his name is whispered, the boy outlaw lives. Thank you for riding with us into the past, and for hearing the story of Billy the Kid, the boy, who became a legend. If this story moved you, make sure to subscribe to Outlaws of the Wild West. Every week, we bring you the untold stories of gunslingers, betrayals, and the legends that shape the frontier.